What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're going to jump in with some Destiny 2 news and updates to round up. So we're going to talk about JOKERS Wild, of course, the DLC coming in like a month or so. Not long to go now, but we've got a few words from Bungie devs about some of the content, some teasers, and we'll round up a few things worth knowing about the next big content drop. But on top of this, we're going to talk about the Dreaming City Curse, Morro, and some big upcoming moments in that story. Some pretty neat stuff to talk about, but I'll give some spoiler alerts before we get there. Also though, we're going to speak about new exotic quests and medals associated with them, the January 29th update, a few new additional bits of information, Forge updates and changes, franchise news, and a whole bunch of other stuff to round up in this video, guys. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this one, but without further delay, let's get straight into it. So of course, we've had our big Black Armory content drops. We're getting to that point where there's more and more anticipation for Bungie to reveal the next batch of hype. But of course, in the meantime, we've got some updates, events, and quests to look forward to. We're going to talk about some of that stuff in a moment. However, on the most recent Crucible Radio podcast, the guys spoke to Robbie Stevens and Lars Bakken from Bungie, and we got some cool insights, content details, and teasers. So we will round up a couple of bits, but I do recommend that you check out the full Crucible Radio podcast linked below. Those guys have some fantastic content on Destiny, but they asked the Bungie devs, where does Gambit go from here? How do you develop Gambit and give those good teams who know all of the spawns and have their roles and can meld a Primeval a challenge without leaving solo players in the dust? And Robbie Stevens says, we've taken a lot of feedback. You will see an evolution of Gambit that touches on a lot of those elements. It's not going to be a completely different experience. It'll still be the Drifter, fighting enemies, spawning Primevals, but there's going to be a fundamental experiential shift within that Gambit paradigm for Season of the Drifter. And Lars Bakken from Bungie adds, we're looking forward to seeing how players react to those changes and how it differs from traditional Gambit, and at the same time, we'd like to mix up traditional Gambit if we're able to. So interestingly, Lars Bakken refers to traditional Gambit, which more clearly outlines the new Gambit experience is probably going to be a different mode to the traditional Gambit one. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but Crucible Radio asks, is there a competitive future for Gambit? Will there be a ranked mode? And could there be a directory of different Gambit modes? And Robbie said, Trials was a very cool experience for a very small percentage of our overall player base, and that was kind of the initial focus, but we've learned that if we focus on the fun, having fun come first and competition come second, that's when a lot more people start to enjoy the mode. So we're kind of sticking to that for now. So that kind of speaks to how competitive any new Gambit content we're about to get is going to be. It doesn't necessarily look like they're moving to a more hardcore version of the mode, but we'll have to wait and find out. However, Crucible Radio did ask if you could give us a hint. It could be as cryptic as Deej riding the Twab, but what surprises might come out of the shadows? And Lars said, I think people are probably wondering how and if we go into the backstory of the Drifter, and we totally do in some really cool ways. I'm really excited when I see some of the lore stuff that we're doing, and there's one thing in particular, well actually two things in particular, that when people see or experience, they're like, oh my god, this is awesome. He goes on to say that the roadmap breaks down what the major beats will be, but obviously there are things that we don't want to talk about until we're ready to. And Lars also adds, I know that people in the community in the last few days or weeks have said, I hope it's not all about Gambit, and the takeaway that folks should have is that there is some Gambit stuff, but this is about the Drifter too, and that's why it's called Season of the Drifter. There are other experiences that have nothing to do with Gambit that are new as well. And Robbie Stevens adds, finally, that the narrative group has been working together since Forsaken with the Gambit team, and a lot of the stuff that you see in original Gambit when you play is going to evolve and change as well. So some pretty interesting words there from the Bungie devs. Once again, I'll link Crucible Radio's podcast below, but we could pick some cool stuff out of this. So the story surrounding the Drifter seems likely to be delivered through the weekly JOKERS Wild quests. And another thing that Chris Barrett hinted towards was that we'd learn about the Derelict, which of course is the Drifter's ship, which tows a mysterious shard of the Ascendant Realm, which is pretty crazy. So there's a lot of stuff to learn about there, but we also learn that the new Gambit experience is indeed a brand new mode. When the devs talk about it, they separate this mode from traditional Gambit, or the original Gambit mode, but they also confirm that traditional Gambit will still be present in the game, so it looks like it will actually be a separate director, and it seems likely that the Gambit tab on the director is going to expand as well to house a new mode, so maybe we'll see something similar to what the Crucible and the Vanguard has, where you have multiple different activities. But of course the roadmap tells us that we'll get new legendary weapons and gear, and of course we can expect a JOKERS Wild theme there, and there will be two exotic quests which we can see. One of them is going to be free as a seasonal update, and one will be linked to DLC, and as we've spoken about already, it's possible that we're going to get Thorn included in this update. However, in a couple of weeks time, we're also going to see Crimson Days. I almost forgot this was a thing, but it's on the roadmap. It's coming this season, and with it being a Valentine's themed event, if it doesn't drop early on in February, then it seems pretty likely that we'll get that event by around February 12th. We don't know about the content, but previously we have seen doubles, new Eververse engrams, and some cool drops, But it does seem that we could get a little more content than that if recent events are anything to go by, but of course I'll keep you posted when we get official details. Moving on though, next let's speak about the curse and the Dreaming City. There's actually quite a lot of curiosity about January 29th right now, because it is going to be the 7th visit to the Queen's Court. And of course there is a triumph that lists to visit Morrisov every time she is present in the Queen's Court, and next week will be the 7th week of Queen's Court itself, and alongside the non-spoiler evidence that we have that suggests the curse will eventually end, we're now getting a fair amount of speculation as to what is going to happen next week on the 29th of January. Interestingly, at the beginning of the cycle last week, the Ghost referenced this being the 7th cycle, but this week Petra has a message to the Queen which is a little more positive, but if you haven't seen this in-game yet, then check it out.
Transmitting to Morrisov. My Queen, my Lady, reinforcements continue to arrive from across the system. Guardians, lots of them. And Corsairs that I haven't seen since the Taken War. Many old friends that I'd written off as dead. Everyone's here, ready to fight for the Dreaming City if this curse goes on for centuries. At least we'll be here together. I wish you could join us.
So of course there seems to be a slight tonal shift right there, and obviously things are still happening within the story of Dreaming City. So once again there's speculation that this is building up to next week's visit from Morrisov. There are many questions. Folks are wondering, are we going to learn more about Prince Aldrin, what's happening with him? And there is also the question of the curse cycle itself. Now we're going to get onto some more spoiler heavy stuff associated with this. So here is your warning. But there is some leaked audio that refers to breaking the curse. I'll link the stuff that I know of down below, so if you want to check it out you can. But once again, we learn that eventually the curse is going to end in some way. There is also reference to opening a portal to the heart of the curse at some point, which we can assume will actually happen in gameplay terms. And this could potentially mean a battle with Quiria, the Taken Vex who's helping to orchestrate the curse loop, or perhaps even a final battle with Dolan Karud, or someone worse potentially. And I personally think this is going to link to the bridge that we see up into the palace at the Dreaming City. Of course, we've seen in cinematic trailers a Guardian actually driving across the bridge with a Sparrow, but we've never actually been able to do this in the game. So it kind of suggests that that could be a piece of future content, potentially linked to breaking the curse. Maybe the tower at the top of the bridge could be part of the pathway to ultimately breaking the curse down. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, but in terms of Morrisov and the Queen's Court, there is potential that next week on the 29th, we're going to get something pretty big. So if any of you guys have been keeping up to date with this story, I'd love to hear your speculation about what's going to happen down in the comment section. Of course though, also next week on the 29th, we're going to get the Last Word quest. So this is pretty exciting. It's going to be a little bit of a grind. One of the things that we don't know about this quest is how we'll actually acquire it. Jinsa previously leaked all of the quest steps for this exotic, and initially it appears that we find a Hive artifact. And when we look at the database, there aren't any additional quest missions to actually kick this quest off. So it seems likely that we'll have to find an item, or the quest will actually begin with some kind of secret that we'll have to figure out as a community. But there are a couple of interesting steps inside of this quest. Specifically, there are 2 different places where we need to earn specific medals in the Crucible. So firstly, you'll have to earn Blood for Blood medals. And if you're wondering what that medal actually is, it requires you to defeat an opponent who just defeated one of your allies. We're not entirely sure how many of these medals need to be earned, but that's how you earn Blood for Blood. There is also the Best Served Cold medal. This will feature in another part of the quest where you need to land the final blow on the Guardian who last defeated you. And from what we know, there will be at least a few of these required for each step, so they're relatively organic medals really, that are kind of thing that you just have to play the game. They're also relatively easy to get, they're not super challenging medals, it just might take a little bit of time. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on those medals, and I'll keep you guys posted on how we actually get the quests dropped when we know more. But of course, in terms of the story loop, as we move towards Joker's World, I've spoken before about how this could be the start of the Thorn story for Destiny 2. If you want to know more details about that, then I'll link a video on it down below. Now though, to round up a couple of things about the franchise, of course we've had a lot of words from Bungie about what's going to happen with the future of Destiny as Bungie move away from Activision. There's also word of a fraud investigation going on at Activision associated with the breakup between the two companies. And just in case you were curious about this, there is a little bit more detail. And essentially, this complaint alleges that throughout the class period, defendants made materially false and misleading statements regarding the company's business, operational and compliance policies. Essentially, investors feel that certain parties at Activision may have made false or misleading statements about the franchise and may have actually hidden prior knowledge of the termination of the Activision Blizzard and Bungie partnership. So it's basically a question of, were Activision allowing people to invest into a franchise that they knew was actually going to have this split at some point? Obviously pretty interesting question, but considering some folks had spoken about this, some folks loosely know that this is happening, I just thought I'd give a little bit more clarification. However, nothing is proven yet, so this is an ongoing ongoing investigation. Also related to the franchise split though, Bungie did confirm that Vicarious Visions, the studio that have been working on a lot of content alongside Bungie, are still producing their final piece of major content, which will be many components of the content that we'll get in Season of Redacted, or Season of the Shadows, which actually isn't the name apparently, but that will be Penumbra, the final season, and update that we'll get for Destiny 2 on the current roadmap. So I think it's definitely a shame that VV will be moving away from the game. They've produced quite a lot of pretty good stuff for the game over the past year or so especially, so it's nice at least that they do get their swan song, as Luke Smith called it, when it comes to Penumbra. I've had a lot of questions about the PC version of the game because of course Vicarious Visions actually built the PC version of Destiny 2. Obviously the current game is completely supported, any content we get is going to be on all platforms, the game's still going to get updates. In terms of the future, I seriously doubt that Bungie will move away from PC. I have heard some speculation, are Bungie going to stop producing the game for PC? I don't believe that's going to be the case because they've got a pretty big PC audience at this point. In fact, it's bigger than the Xbox audience. Of course, that's the console I play on the most. So PC absolutely houses a fairly significant portion of Destiny's player base. So fear not, Bungie are not going to want to throw that away. But now let's get on to a few changes coming up very shortly. So of course, we've got the January 29th update, we'll get some new content alongside that, but Bungie also confirmed some pretty positive changes for forges in the game. So they're no longer going to remove ballistics logs on reset, and the stack limit for ballistics logs has been increased to 5 per character, and weapon frames carried across the reset will now refund into the following. So gold frames will refund into 1 ballistic log, silver frames refund into 3 modulus reports, and radiance matrices will be removed on weekly resets. So bear that in mind. Players will also still be able to only purchase up to 2 gold frames per week. But Bungie have also increased the drop rate of the Black Armory lore from 10% to 20%, as well as some other quality of life changes associated with the Forge. So that's going to be pretty good. Just wanted to round that up again because it drops on the 29th. I'll keep you posted on any additional stuff Bungie break down. Also, I did speak about curated drops the other day. At the time, I hadn't actually got one in the game, but I managed to get lucky this week, and as you can see, I picked up the curated Striker Shorthand Sword. So whenever you get a curated roll, you'll actually get a double drop. Firstly, the frame that you're forging, and then the curated roll on top of it. And once again, these drop from powerful frames inside of the Baguzia Forge. So do bear that in mind if you want to pick up any curated rolls. But also something else for the January 29th update. Cosmos says enhancement cores not dropping from the Valor and Glory Legend rank is a bug. Good news is that we're fixing that next week in update 2.1.4. And that is the update on the 29th. And he says, as far as adding more sources for enhancement cores, to things like raids, nightfalls, and infamy, I'll pass this feedback along to the dev team. Thanks for sharing your suggestion. Cosmos also said, I've continued to present to the dev team that a large portion of the community has given feedback that they would like to have enhancement cores costs removed from Infusion. So that's definitely positive, because in Cosmos' words, a large portion of the community is saying this. So if that's something you feel should be changed, I think we're probably about as close to that change as we've ever been. So we'll have to see if Bungie comes up with anything over the next few weeks. Of course, on top of this, there are subclass changes which we've been over before, and I'll keep you posted with patch notes next week. But guys, for today, that is going to summarize the video. So we've spoken about a lot of stuff right here. Let me know your thoughts on what Bungie devs said about Jokers Wild, any of the content that you're really looking forward to there, or any of your concerns, of course. But I'd also love to hear your speculation on the Dreaming City Curse, the future of the franchise and the content we're going to get, or any of your thoughts about the January updates. But if you have enjoyed the video, guys, a rating is very much appreciated below. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe to see a lot more Destiny 2 content. For now though, as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and whatever you guys get up to, I hope you have an awesome day.